What is the highest DPS you can do in Hollow Knight? Today we're going to find out. Similar to the last video where we tried to get the highest damage in a single hit, once again we're going to need to fully upgrade the nail all the way to its pure form. And just as a point of comparison we can compare to later on, with just the pure nail hitting for 21 damage and the base attack speed which lets us hit 2.43 times per second, this setup is dealing 51.22 damage per second. But before we continue, I'll mention a few small rules we'll be following. We'll be pretending animation cancelling doesn't exist. Sure, you can squeeze out a little bit of extra damage, but it's fairly hard to do consistently, so I'm not going to be factoring it in. And second, we'll be assuming absolutely perfect inputs with zero delay between button presses, once again to keep things simple. So where do we go from here? Well, the two most obvious choices are Unbreakable Strength, which will increase our nail damage to 32 per hit, and Quick Slash, which will increase our attack speed. If we pick Strength, it would result in a DPS increase of 52.3%, or if we pick Quick Slash, we'd get an increase of 46.4%. Both of these charms only cost 3 notches, and it doesn't take a genius to tell using both is a good idea, so why am I telling you these numbers? Well, I just wanted to use this opportunity to show you how combining attack speed with extra damage multiplies the effect. If we add the two aforementioned individual DPS increases from Quick Slash and Strength, it'd work out to 98.7%. However, in reality, a build using both of these charms is actually dealing 123% more DPS. That's an extra 24.3% than if we simply added the two values together. But I digress. So now we're hitting for 114.27 damage per second. And the next clear option is going to be Fury of the Fallen, which will further boost our nail damage by 75% when at 1 mask. And with these 3 charms combined, we're hitting for 56 damage per strike, and the attack speed from Quick Slash means we're hitting 3.57 times per second. This will work out to a whopping 199.97 DPS, just about 4 times what we started with. But we still have 3 notches to fill up. Now, in the real game, you'd probably want to throw on Steady Body to manage recoil, or perhaps Long Nail for some extra range, or even perhaps Shaman Stone for some extra damage on spells. But we're not here for that. We're here to get the highest damage number possible. Unfortunately, there aren't many great options that are going to boost our DPS much more. We've ran out of charms that boost nail damage or attack speed directly, and since our nail is generating 200 damage per second, spells aren't really an option, as we'd need a spell to deal at least that much damage on a non-spell focused build within a second, which isn't happening. So we're relegated to using more passive charms, such as summons for our final 3 notches. And as it happens, Grimchild is going to be our best option. In the Grimchild deep dive, we did some testing and discovered it can do about 5.71 damage per second in a near perfect scenario. However, if we put on Weaver Song first, which in optimal conditions we discovered does around 4.75 DPS, we can overcharm and fit both of these on for a combined 10.38 extra DPS. That's still a drop in the bucket compared to our 199.97 DPS from our nail, but still it's the best we can do. And this brings our grand total to 210.42. The most DPS you can do in the base game. But what if we open it up to charms from the Pale Court mod? Well, now things get interesting. Pale Court gives us access to a few key charms that can really turbocharge our damage. The first of which is Mark of Purity. This charm will provide ramping attack speed that can get crazy high at the cost of 20% of our nail damage. This fills out the last 3 slots far more effectively than Grimchild and Weaver Song ever could. Swapping it out skyrockets our attack speed from 3.571 attacks per second to an insane 7.651 attacks per second once we reach full speed. This increases our DPS by 62% and takes us all the way to 344.29 damage per second. Now yes, we do lose 20% of our nail damage, and unfortunately it's 20% of our total damage after buffs applied, which means it works out to even more. However, it does give us so much attack speed that it still works out being a huge damage increase anyway, but believe it or not, we can still do better. Although with 11 out of 11 of our notches filled, we're gonna have to make some sacrifices to fit the final charm on. The charm in question is Abyssal Bloom. This boosts our damage for each missing mask, as well as giving us a huge range boost at 1 mask, as well as some other bonuses. There are some cool synergies with any charm that adds masks, as well as Sharp Shadow, which boosts the bonus damage received from each mask lost, which will be a consideration if we have any notches to spare. And now it's time to make a tough decision. Even though each and every one of these charms are incredibly powerful, we still need to ditch one to make room for the even more powerful Abyssal Bloom. At 1 masks, this will be giving us an extra 75% damage, the same as Fury of the Fallen. This boost will further be multiplied by Unbreakable Strength, as well as our attack speed charms. And the charm we have to cut will have to be Quick Slash. Despite being one of the best damage increasing charms in the base game, it doesn't quite make the cut, and Mark of Purity, despite its 20% nail damage reduction, still provides more than enough attack speed for our needs and a bigger overall DPS increase. Now a quick disclaimer, in the real game, Quick Slash might very well be the easier to use option, and you don't have to spend any time ramping up the attack speed. However, since our goal here is to just find the absolute maximum DPS number, we aren't really concerned about these drawbacks. Anyway, this still leaves us with 3 slots spare, one of which we'll need to use for Abyssal Bloom to overcharm with, but 2 are still free for whatever we want. And the only 2-notch charm that can really help us here is Sharp Shadow and Unbreakable Heart. As I mentioned earlier, Sharp Shadow has a special interaction with Abyssal Bloom, which is going to increase the amount of damage provided per each missing mask. We have 8 masks that we can lose before dying in this build, and this synergy will be adding an extra 1.875 damage per missing mask for a total of 15% extra nail damage. Unbreakable Heart, on the other hand, will just allow us to lose 2 extra masks. We're already getting 9.375% damage boost for each missing mask, therefore this provides us with an extra 18.75% damage boost, which slightly beats out Sharp Shadow by 3.75%. So onto the build it goes. And now of course the final touch. Using the final notch will be overcharming the massive 5-notch cost of Abyssal Bloom. Now all we need to do is lose masks until we have 1 left to trigger all our damage bonuses. And there we have it. We're now hitting for 69 damage per hit, 5.88 times every second when fully stacked, meaning we've cracked the 400 DPS barrier with a whopping 405.79 damage per second. Enough to kill Nightmare King Grim in 4 seconds, assuming they had no invincibility phases and we could start fully ramped up on attack speed. But something unexpected happens when you take this build into the real game. Instead of the projected 405 DPS, somehow I was hitting way harder than I should be, dealing around 578 DPS. So where was this extra 172 DPS coming from? Had I messed up the calculation? Was my recording software messing with the results? What's going on here? After I confirmed the damage per hit was 69 as expected, I went frame by frame and calculated how many hits per second we were landing. It should be 5.88, however what I found in the footage was 8.38 attacks per second, way more than it should be. And that's where I found it. Shout out to Tea Time for helping me figure this one out, but it turns out there's an unintentional interaction between Mark of Purity and Abyssal Bloom that was causing additional hits to occur. You see, Mark of Purity has a hidden effect that alters the duration of the enemy's iframes. Without this, the Knight would be able to attack faster than the iframes take to expire, and most of your attacks would deal no damage. And at the final form of Abyssal Bloom, the Knight's attack hitbox lingers a bit longer than normal. This combination means the hits of Abyssal Bloom can often deal damage 2 times per strike, and I found this occurred roughly 40% of the time. This of course threw off all my calculations for this build. And with this newfound interaction, this build is now hitting for 578.54 damage per second. This is the highest possible DPS you can achieve with the base game in Pale Court, but I can't help but wonder, what if we had just 1 more notch and we could get Quick Slash back on instead of Unbreakable Heart? What would happen then? Well, let's try it. Our attack speed cap would skyrocket back to 7.65 attacks per second, increasing our DPS to 489.66. At least that's what I planned on saying before we discovered this special interaction. But not only does the previous build with 1 less notch have a higher effective attack speed of 8.38 attacks per second, but the double hit effect from Purity and Abyssal Bloom, which is so reliant on the precise timings and duration of our attacks to work, gets a bit messed up. We still do double hits, however, due to the timing, making the second hit come in slightly earlier, it causes our next swing to sometimes miss. I won't go into the exact details, but this results in us only landing 7.06 attacks per second, decreasing our DPS compared to the expected 489 down to 452. But what if we went even further beyond? What if notches just weren't an issue and we could put on any charm we wanted? Well, for the small cost of 24 notches, we could add on Sharp Shadow, Unbreakable Heart, and Joni's Blessing to really buff up the amount of health we have to lose and therefore convert to damage using Abyssal Bloom, as well as the amount we gain from each missing mask. This setup would be the ultimate nail build, dealing 88 damage per strike for an absolutely crazy 673.28 damage per second. And finally, if we put on literally every single charm in the game and pretend things like Dream Shield and summons are hitting as often as possible, we can work out that we'd be hitting for roughly 728.86 damage per second, which is an extra 55 DPS on top of the previous nail only build. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe even learned a few things. If you haven't already, check out my previous video where we discovered the highest single hit you can do in Hollow Knight. Or if you're scratching your head about all these Pale Court charms and wondering what they are, check out my Pale Court charm deep dive, where I go in depth and tell you everything you'd ever want to know about them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.